So this week in Biddeford, Maine, an ICE officer fatally shot a Colombian man named Juan Sebastian Duran Guerrero, and this was during an immigration enforcement operation. And according to reporting so far, Guerrero was not the intended target of the operation, and federal officials they've said that agents attempted to stop a vehicle, and that the vehicle tried to flee, and that an officer fired because he feared for public safety. Now, those facts are still being investigated, right? And that's important. In a constitutional system, because I make videos about civics, in a constitutional system, we should be careful about reaching final conclusions before the evidence is complete. But from a civics standpoint, this case raises an important question, and that is, what does the rule of law require when federal law enforcement uses deadly force? Now, the first thing to understand is that immigration enforcement is still a government power. ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is a federal agency. The officers are exercising authority on behalf of the U.S. government, and that means their actions are not outside the Constitution. But we have to remember, I made a video on this earlier. The Constitution does not only protect citizens. Many constitutional protections apply to persons. That's part of the verbiage in the document. That distinction is important as well, because a person's immigration status does not mean that the government has unlimited authority over that person. Now, that doesn't mean that law enforcement can never use force. Officers can face dangerous and fast-moving, unpredictable situations. And the law recognizes that. But the rule of law requires that force, especially deadly force, be justified and limited, investigated, and then accountable. And this is where, like when we're looking at civics, it becomes more than just a bunch of vocabulary terms. The rule of law just doesn't simply mean that citizens must obey the law. It also means that government must obey the law. It means public officials don't get a blank check because their job is hard, it's difficult, it's controversial, or it's politically charged. So, if a person breaks the law, that person still has rights. If someone is suspected of being in the country unlawfully, that person still has rights. If the government is carrying out an immigration operation, the government still has limits. And that's the heart of constitutional government. So this particular case, this tragic case, it shows why transparency is so important. In this kind of case, when deadly force is used, the public needs facts. We need things like body camera footage, if it exists, surveillance video, timelines, witness accounts, agency policies, and independent investigation. Now, my understanding is that they're saying that there was no body cams on these particular ICE agents because it's been a difficult rollout with the materials or whatever. But anyway, getting back to it. Without transparency, people fill that silence with suspicion. And when suspicion begins to replace trust, the rule of law gets weaker. Now, we can hold on to several ideas at the same time. We can hold on to the fact that immigration law exists, and that federal officers have difficult jobs, and that no one should rush to judgment before the investigation is complete, and that we should also hold on to the fact that government power, especially armed government power, must be accountable when it takes a human life. Now, what I'm trying to come up with here is this is not an anti-law enforcement position. This is a rule of law position, because a republic can't simply ask whether government had power. It also has to ask how that power was used, and whether it was lawful, whether it was necessary, and what happens when the government gets it wrong. Because the rule of law is tested most clearly not when government power is easy, but when government power is armed and contested and deadly. Now, this is the second ICE-related shooting within a week that's led to fatalities. Folks in Maine are definitely up protesting, demanding answers. And the government's going to continue to say that it's part of an ongoing investigation, so it's going to limit what can be released as far as information to the public. And so, like I said, when there's going to be blanks and there's going to be questions and silence, people are going to fill those blanks with their own answers. And so, of course, this will be an ongoing story, but it does raise some very important civics questions and questions about our government. Thanks for watching.